I've heard of you.
So have I.
So for anybody who doesn't know who I am, my name's Derek Crabb. I produce the History of Comics on Film segments that a lot of people probably watch on hocof.blogspot.com. Basically, this is twofold purpose. I just sort of wanted to give a response. I sort of felt compelled to give a response to the review for Cry for Justice. I guess the twofold part of it is I'm just going to pimp out and promote all the websites that I go to and everybody's work who I really like. So just so everybody knows up front, it's not like an attack or a vicious, brutal thing or anything, but it's like, you know how you watch videos and you're watching the video and you're kind of agreeing with the reviewer and everything's kind of going good, and then all of a sudden they might say something and you just kind of wince and you kind of go like, dude, no, like, that's wrong, or no, I don't agree with that, or, you know, that kind of thing, and you just kind of go, no, that's not right, and you want to, like, stop the guy, or, you know, you want to say something. I guess it's easier on a message board because sometimes you can just post a reply and do that kind of thing really quick. But anyway, I guess the point is sometimes when you are watching video reviews, you might have that response maybe once during the video or something like that. But during the Cry for Justice videos, and before you, I guess, go any further, you can see the Cry for Justice videos at the Atop the Fourth Wall website. I was going to wait till he was finished reviewing all, I guess, 7 issues or whatever it is of the miniseries, but I've been watching the videos, and so the 2 reviews have come out so far, and it's like everything, well, not everything, but like, you know, every other thing I'm kind of like wincing and going, no, you know, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to make this video. I don't know, I felt like making the video, I felt compelled to do it, to have some kind of retort to all the criticism for Cry for Justice, because it's kind of like, dude, the whole point of his reviews are how the comic's bad, it sucks, and he's gonna burn it, right? Well, I don't think it's that bad, so, and if you'll bear with me, I might reference my notes every once in a while, but anyway, I just wanted to kind of get all this off my chest.
Spare me this mockery of justice!
So, one of the first things that is being constantly mocked in the video is the whole, they want justice. And what does justice mean? Is it social justice? Is it criminal justice? You know, what's that supposed to mean? And it's kind of said mockingly that, you know, he does it in his mock voice where he's like, I want justice! You know, and all that kind of stuff. And you're kind of like, well, what does justice mean? I think it's pretty obvious what the intention is. I mean, there's a lot of history, and I'm just going to go through with the history because that's my thing, right? So, you know, there's plenty of superhero groups in the past that have tried to do the same thing that Cry for Justice has done. There's been like Justice League Elite or JL Elite, the Outsiders, you know, and more specifically, you know, more current and modern, I guess, relatively speaking, is something like the Authority. They're all versions of, you know, the Justice League to an extent, where they're the Black Ops version of the group, or the group that's going to do, you know, what the other group can't do. Even if you go back to Squadron Supreme in the 1980s, it's the same thing. It's the Justice League, but going one step further. Whether that's right or wrong, ethical or not, you know, you can have arguments over that, but, I mean, that's the premise. Like, that's, you know, what these people are, you know, and is justice the same thing as vengeance? He brings it up. Is justice killing someone? Sometimes, right? I mean, it's like, that's what they're talking about. Like, what is it? It's and it's not so much like, is it social justice, is it criminal justice? It's fiction. It's comic justice. I mean, and there's different things. There's movie justice and comic justice. And when you're talking about movies, a lot of the times, in the end of the movie, the villain gets killed. A lot of times with superhero comics, the villain doesn't get killed. He gets put in handcuffs and he gets sent off to jail. I think the reason for that is kind of twofold. A lot of early comic books, comic justice was kind of the same thing as movie justice. I mean, you had guys like the Comet killing people, people like, you know, even Batman killing vampires or what have you. And there's a lot of different examples of comic characters killing people or not killing people. And it's kind of interesting that, you know, he complains about justice and, you know, proactive justice and all these kind of concepts they bring up and what that means. And maybe it's for entertainment value too. It's something to make fun of and mock, and he just wants to, you know, write on that. But I don't think it makes sense to me. I mean, the criticism, not so much the story. Like, the story makes sense. I understand what the concept of proactive justice in the comic is. The concept is that proactive justice is not so much that he's gonna magically have a Tom Cruise, you know, crystal ball where they, you know, do the thing in Minority Report and they know what's gonna happen before it happens and then they stop it. No, the thing is, people like Libra, people like the Human Flame committed vile and heinous acts, right? So proactive just means they're not going to sit around and wait for them to commit a heinous act again. Do you know what I mean? It's like, what? He killed the Martian Manhunter, right? Yeah, it's comics, and Martian Manhunter comes back to life, and yeah, Batman's not really dead, and all this kind of crap, right? But the thing of it is, if you just look at it straightforwardly, at that point in time, right, those two guys were dead. And all Hal Jordan is saying is that if the Human Flame did it already, we might as well go after those guys. I mean, the FBI has a most wanted list for a reason, right? I mean, to me, that's proactive. You've got a list of targets. They're people you're going to go after. It's not like you're going to wait for someone on the FBI's most wanted list to commit a crime again and then go after them. I think that's what the concept is. Hopefully I'm clarifying my position and what I think. So I don't know. I don't think it's anything worth mocking. I mean, that's kind of why I wince at it. So like comic characters, all the time, comic justice is always been based on the idea, at least superheroes traditionally, they work outside of the law. So this comic book isn't so much getting away from that. I mean, yeah, you can say, oh, well, the Justice League, you know, obviously responds to crimes as they happen, and obviously the Justice League is looking for justice as well, right? But I think all they're getting at is that superheroes, even though they work outside of the law, they have their own subsect of rules, like this kind of traditional, you know, DC hierarchy of what's going on in comic land. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, Superman says, you know, my name is Superman and I don't kill. Even though, at the same time, this is something that's always been troubling to me, he's perfectly willing to send Imperiex back to the dawn of time and let the Big Bang blow him up for him. Or, you know, at the end of Hunter Prey, it's like Doomsday gets sent back to the dawn of time or whatever. I mean, certainly there's instances like that where it's kill or be killed. It's not like he was worrying about, you know, Doomsday's civil rights when he's tearing up the whole city. It's not like they were going to have a big trial for him. It's like they went at it. That's it. You know, end of story. So, I mean, I don't know, like, what do you want, you know, like, I mean, there are things that, when I was younger, I guess I didn't understand as much. When I was growing up, you know, one of the comics I was reading was Secret Wars, and in Secret Wars, all the Avengers were on Magneto's ass about killing 150 guys in a submarine. So it was a Russian sub, and he killed all these guys. And at the time, I was kind of like, well, you know, I don't know. In my head, I guess, it's kind of like watching Star Trek The Next Generation movie where they just throw out some random fucking number where, you know, oh, yes, Mr. Data, 50,000 people are on that planet. Oh, if the sun goes nova, it's all going to be over. You know, and it's like, oh, okay, so it's just some random number. But you don't see the 50,000 people getting horribly scarred when the sun goes nova or wiped out or whatever. Then maybe you'd be kind of traumatized, right? And it might sink in a little bit more. So it's like, I think when I was younger, I just kind of blew it off. I went, what, dude? Magneto's trying to be good. He's trying to be with the X-Men. He's cool. He's cool. Like, he's an edgy villain, and he's got depth and dimensionality and all this stuff. But I think the older I got, the more I kind of went, no, fuck that. Magneto's a terrorist. He killed 150 people. All the, hey, mister, with Captain America, and the nay villain with Thor, and all that stuff. It makes more sense to me now. Because I wasn't thinking about, Magneto's feelings, and I guess to delve back into that point, the whole civil rights of some guy who kills a bunch of people, it's like, okay, so Magneto got a trial, but that trial was a joke. I mean, what good did that do? I mean, in terms of comics and, the story and all that kind of stuff. I mean, everything was kind of chintzy and forced, and I don't know. It's been a while since I read X-Men 200, but, the point is, what, it took 50 issues before they even tried the guy for what he did? I think that's part of that proactive thing. It's sort of cutting all the red tape. I mean, if you think that's bad and you don't agree with it, that's fine. But it doesn't mean it's a bad story or the comic sucks. Or even other villains that have, done horrible and reprehensible things. You've got Black Adam, right? Black Adam killed tons of people. And it got to be that point of once World War III happened and he took out all these people, it's like then they tried to do a miniseries with him. It's like, I don't know. To me, that kind of affects my sensibilities where, I don't think it was necessarily a good idea. I guess it doesn't mean it's a bad comic book, the Black Adam miniseries, but you're kind of like thinking to yourself, well, how are you supposed to relate to this guy? I mean, I don't know. Certain things at certain points, I'm totally going off on tangents here, but, A Beautiful Mind, a movie with Russell Crowe, I think the minute I sort of disconnected with that movie and couldn't relate to him anymore was when he almost let his baby drown. And it was just one of those things where, you're supposed to connect. You're supposed to identify with these people, especially the protagonists of the story. You're supposed to identify with Black Adam and be like, oh, well, all he wants is to get ISIS back. All he wants is to restart his family that was ripped away from him. And there are all these sort of excuses or things that are, they play on your sensitivity or tug on your heartstrings. All Mr. Freeze wants is for his wife to be healthy and stuff. But that doesn't really justify, like, freezing a bunch of people and, in effect, killing them. Just because, Nora Freeze is sick. Or, just because Nora Freeze, when she got better, told Victor Freeze to go shove it because he's a nut job. Like, it doesn't make it okay. Just because Magneto is an advocate for mutant rights doesn't mean he needs to sink a sub full of 150 people. I mean, I don't know. It's like if you're gonna, argue the ethics of one thing, you gotta look at it from the other point of view too, I guess. Another thing I was thinking of when thinking of the point of justice and what that means and the concept of that is Captain Marvel. I just wrote a blog about some of my favorite Captain Marvel stories. The original Monster Society arc ends with, spoilers, ends with Mr. Mine being executed. So, I mean, and my point is with this is Captain Marvel is not a murderer, it's justice, right? He brings Mr. Mine to justice. He doesn't kill Mr. Mine. He captures Mr. Mine. He's a war criminal. He's tried, and then he's executed. It takes like 3 panels. It's kind of like Captain Marvel's just sitting there kind of like, hey, all right, just listening to the radio. I guess they're going to execute Mr. Mine. And then the radio's kind of like, boop, we've executed Mr. Mine. And Captain Marvel's kind of like, good, now I can go to sleep soundly. And clicks off the radio. And that's the end of it. So, I don't know. To me, like, some of that seems to fit into that proactive mold. I mean, or the kind of, the dirty little secret that even though I tend to think that movie justice, and it's just a phrase I have for, the Batman movies, the Joker gets movie justice, at least Jack Nicholson Joker. The Penguin gets movie justice. Tommy Lee Jones Two-Face gets movie justice.
Yes, of course you're right, Bruce. Emotion's always the enemy of true justice. Thank you. You've always been a good friend.
And what I mean by that is, you know, if it was a regular comic book or an episode of Batman the Animated Series, you know, Batman might punch the guy out, the Joker might slip on an oil slick, and then it's like, okay, cart the sucker off to jail. But since it's the end of a movie, you know, and it's an action movie and a Hollywood movie, you know, there's this need to have the climax and the sort of vindication of, the villain is dead. And I'm not necessarily advocating that. I think with some of those movies, when I say movie justice, I kind of mock it. I kind of say, oh, look, it's another example of movie justice. Or Spider-Man, the movie, gets lucky because it just so happens that, you know, the comic storyline coincided with Hollywood's desire for movie justice. But in a lot of those Batman movies, it's that, you know, sort of forced thing of, oh, the guy's got to fall from a fucking building at the end and die. And I guess my point with that is it's kind of different from what we generally perceive to be as comic justice. But at the same time, you know, at the top of my head, I can think of two big examples where Batman kills somebody, and usually there's excuses for it. You know, oh, it's a vampire or it's a werewolf. Okay, fine. He killed a parademon. He used a gun to kill a parademon in Cosmic Odyssey. You can say it's an alien gun, you can say, oh, it's just a parademon, but it's still living, right? It's still proactive justice, or whatever. It's like the guy was coming right at him. It's like, time to take the guy out. The only way Batman could do it, because he wasn't Uber Grant Morrison Bat God back then, he just had to pick up the blaster and lay into the guy, right? And then the other thing I'm thinking of where Batman had to kill somebody, and I can't remember the exact issue, but I'll find it, was like a Legends of the Dark Knight, where it's a Mignola issue. He's wrestling with someone in the graveyard, and eventually, basically, the guy gets impaled. So, I mean, there's a lot of, I don't know, sometimes, I guess the reason why I bring it up is because I can kind of see where things are going. What I suspect is that, you know, there'll be some criticism over Green Arrow. I mean, he already kind of mentioned it. I guess it was more in reference to Prometheus getting owned by an arrow. But dude, arrows. So that's a little in-joke for a shout out at people at Bot Talk. Arrows, dude. Oh, but I guess what my point is with knowing where the criticism is going, that Green Arrow killed somebody. I mean, that's kind of the culmination of the story, right? And he kills somebody out of vengeance. But in some ways, I mean, there are so many villains, and it's not that they're good villains because you relate to them or you think they're cool, like the Joker or something, but they're good villains because you hate their guts. You despise them. Like, you want to see them dead. This might be a random reference for people, but Yazan in Zeta Gundam did not actually get killed by anyone. But dude, he was a guy where I hated that fucking guy. Like, when Camille was on his ass at the end of episode 50, I was like, man, shoot that fucking son of a bitch. So, I don't, you know, I guess I'm just trying to bring home the point to me. Maybe it's preemptive criticism of a criticism, but I know some of the criticism of Cry for Justice is it ends with Green Arrow killing Prometheus. But man, I gotta tell you, there's some sense of relief in that for me. Basically, if anybody doesn't know what the hell I'm talking about, at the end of Cry for Justice, the villain character, Prometheus, is the one responsible for blowing up Green Arrow's hometown of Star City. It's probably like the fucking 5th or 6th time the city's gone all to hell. But anyway, whatever. It's comics, right? But so this time it's really serious. Star City gets blown up, right? And who is at the heart of that explosion is Green Arrow has a sidekick, Speedy, grew up to be Arsenal, Roy Harper. You might remember him from my video on Teen Titans. So Speedy has a daughter, and her name's Leon. And so Leon's there. And so for a lot of people, like Linkara, I guess, you know, I mean, that's probably going to be a point of contention. Some of his favorite comic books obviously must be that run of Titans. I don't have as close a sensitivity to that era of Titans, But I can respect and understand that somebody, you know, it's like, he mentioned not liking Identity Crisis. I don't particularly care for Identity Crisis either. But like somebody who I grew up with, say, would be Firestorm. I watched the Superpowers series. I had the little toys that did the, you know, motion and stuff like that. Firestorm was one of my heroes. So to see Firestorm get punked and owned by Shadow Thief and blown up and, you know, treated basically like a punk character, like, I get where he gets upset about pointless death. But my, I guess, counter to that is, well, you know what? Grant Morrison did it to James Robinson first. He likes bringing up creator stuff and how Gail Simone's affected by something that Robinson wrote and so on and so forth. Grant Morrison, when he was writing his Seven Soldiers of Victory miniseries, pretty much did what Linkara's pissed off about in Cry for Justice. All the original Seven Soldiers were kind of basically killed off camera, or, you know, I can show you the panel, but it's like, you couldn't tell who was who. It's all kind of dark and blacks or whatever. You know, if I showed you where the vigilante gets killed, you wouldn't know it. It's just a silhouette of a guy in black, you know, if you're not comic expert aficionado. And, you know, it's kind of like, oh, well, he was an old fuck anyway. You know, so he's dead, and let's go on with my story. So for someone like James Robinson, who loves the Vigilante, that's another video that I have, Vigilante Fighting Hero of the West. It's an old movie serial based on that same comic character. And I mentioned it in there, too. James Robinson knew that was the continuity up to that point, and he didn't shit on it. He didn't say it didn't happen. He was just kind of like, dude, I'm here. I got better. And so the next time you saw Vigilante, he was in a Jimmy Olsen special, and he was like the sheriff, and everything's hunky-dory. But I guess my point is with that is, look, he loved the character, right? So all this stuff about Global Guardians, all the different side characters getting killed off by Prometheus, you know, him going after the superhero community and hunting them down and stuff like that. You know, if you like the Global Guardians, you know what? Bring them back to life, dude. Like, you know, or hope that there's some writer out there who has the same love for the Global Guardians that you do. You know, me, you know, whatever, Global Guardians. It's like, I think of anybody, Fire and Ice, and they're okay, so, you know, what do you want from me? But, you know, all the other guys, it's like, okay, so the Tasmanian Devil, who is not the Warner Brothers character, but the Australian superhero, is dead. Okay, well, cry me a fucking river. I don't really care that much. But if there's the, you know, cadre of Tasmanian Devil fans out there that, you know, share the ire, well, then, you know, email me and let me have it. But as far as Prometheus goes, Prometheus was also a Grant Morrison character. And he does a good job of bringing up some of Prometheus's history, how he basically was supposed to be this master supervillain, and he could basically download whatever skill he needed to beat the hero at hand. In some ways he critiques Robinson calling him an evil Batman or whatever and Cry for Justice. But with Robinson, it seemed like there was love for the character. I mean, he tried to retcon some things. For those of you who don't know what a retcon is, because nobody's ever explained it to you, it's short for retroactive continuity. And that's basically where something happens in a comic book and it's the standard way that it's always been. I'm going to give you a couple examples of both good and bad retcons. So I'll start out with the bad. This is all in my opinion, so feel free to yell at me later or whatever. But Wolverine has always had adamantium claws, you know, in the comics, right? That's part of his backstory. You know, they were bonded to him, you know. I guess always is a bad choice of words, but, you know, you get the idea. Wolverine, you know, in comic continuity has his adamantium claws. That's a hard and fast rule. It's a fact. Everybody knows it. So, a version of a bad retcon, to me, which has become almost standardized and de facto, are the bone claws. Wolverine did not always have bone claws, believe it or not. There have been plenty of instances, especially like the sort of sub-origin in the Alpha Flight comics, where he first realizes he has his adamantium, and he, you know, when the claws pop out in front of Heather Hudson, he's like shocked. You know, he's like, what the fuck are these? So, to me, you know, it was always like, well, Weapon X program put the claws, you know, Department H, or whatever the hell you want to call them, the Canadian guys, Andre Thornton, all those guys, Cornelius, put the claws there. But eventually they did a run where Wolverine got his adamantium ripped out by Magneto, and he lost all the adamantium. So you had Wolverine running around without claws. Well, that was a problem because I guess claws are what define Wolverine. And so eventually, during the Larry Hama run of Wolverine, eventually bone claws pop out. Now, I think when I first read it, I was always thinking like, oh, well, they just grew, to be part of the healing factor. Like his body somehow knew, oh shit, dude, you don't have claws anymore. Well, let's heal that up, and I'll just grow you some fucking claws. That's how I always took it. Like, that he never had bone claws until that moment in time, until Wolverine 100. And then, or 75, or whenever the fuck his adamantium got pulled out, right? I always took it in my head, like, oh, his bone claws just fucking magically grew because it was part of his healing factor. His healing factor was so used to having, his body was so used to having fucking claws that they just grew him some ones with bones. It was the best his fucking body could do, right? But if you look at, say, Wolverine Origins now, and all this backstory where, like, Rogue, there was some X-Men comic where Rogue, old school Rogue, when she was with the Brotherhood or around that time, where she was sloppy kissing Captain America and everybody. It was like that time frame of Rogue, when she first appeared and was a villain for a little while, and then just joined the X-Men. She touched Wolverine, and then she grew bone claws. So to me, that's a retcon. It's retroactive continuity. It's saying, hey, what you thought you knew was that Wolverine always had adamantium claws and never got bone claws till later. But now what we're telling you, Wolverine Origins, at the issue of X-Men that I'm thinking of, where Rogue pops the bone claws at a past point. It's like a flashback. The retcon, the retroactive continuity, is telling you what you thought you knew isn't what you knew. And sometimes that becomes standardized and really sticks and lasts forever. And there's good versions of this too. That to me was like sort of a bad version because I don't really like that or agree with it, but it's kind of standardized now and there's nothing I can do about it. But like a good example of a retcon would be Swamp Thing. Originally was Alec Holland, who was a scientist, and there's a lab accident and all this crazy stuff with Arcane and everybody, and it's kind of like, the Hulk or the Fantastic Four or whatever, the Thing. The lab accident, he takes his secret chemical formula with him, and he's burning and he's on fire, and he, dives into the muck, and they think he's dead, but what happens is he becomes the Swamp Thing. And so Alec Holland is constantly trying to like, oh, I want to find a cure. I don't want to be the Swamp Thing monster anymore. I want to be human again. So what was kind of a genius retcon by Alan Moore, and maybe it's not fair because I'm bringing up Alan Moore classic stuff, but this is an example of a good retcon. Alan Moore reveals in Swamp Thing 21 that he's a plant. So this changes the whole dynamic. He wasn't Alec Holland who turned into Swamp Thing. He was a plant who was under the impression that he was Alec Holland. So there's no fucking way he could ever become normal again. So this totally, like, shatters his whole fucking world. And it's been that way ever since, that Swamp Thing is a plant and a member of the Parliament of Green and all these kind of, concepts and everything. And so that's something way back in the 80s or whatever, and that was something that always, stuck with me. It's probably one of my favorite comics, that issue of Swamp Thing. And so my point with talking about that was that James Robinson applies a retcon to Prometheus. So Prometheus had always been a Grant Morrison character in Justice League, a JLA run. And so this is viewed as it's a highly regarded run of Justice League. It's the beginning of the whole, to me, it really is the beginning of the whole Bat God fan aura thing where, like, Batman can do any fucking thing. And, at the time, I was a pretty huge Bat fanatic. So to me, like, a lot of those things were kind of cool. I've since sort of subsided with that. I think it got a little too out there, a little too much Batman can do anything, and it doesn't sort of make sense to me anymore. That's, I guess, another, tangent or whatever. But the point is, Prometheus was a Grant Morrison character. He was in JLA, and the whole point was he was this badass guy who was going to take down the Justice League, and pretty nearly did. But I just want to mention, like, I know the point is, oh, well, Batman's the one who beat him. Oh, how did he beat him? Well, he downloaded Stephen Hawking's skills into Prometheus's doohickey. Well, that's not entirely true. That's sort of sugarcoating the whole thing, like acting like Prometheus was a fucking badass the whole run. Catwoman kicked the guy in the fucking nuts, right? I mean, and that's not retconnable. It's not like it was some other asshole in the Prometheus suit then. Because the retcon, basically, the retroactive continuity with Prometheus says, well, at the end of the Grant Morrison run arc of Prometheus, the real Prometheus was mind-zonked and put away, like Linkara explains. And then the guy you saw in Gotham Knights or Birds of Prey was some other douchebag. And then this here, in Cry for Justice, is the real Prometheus. Okay, fine. But I'm just here to say, like, Catwoman kicked the guy in the nuts. So if Catwoman can kick Prometheus in the fucking nuts, Green Arrow can fucking shoot an arrow in the guy's fucking head. So that's what I'm saying. I don't know if I said this at the beginning, but this is not to be like an attack. This is sort of like an open-ended discussion type thing. So I just want that to be clear. It's not an assault. I'm basically doing this so I can plug the guy's site. And there's plenty of other people who I really like. Guys like Spoonie, Jezu Otaku. All those videos are really pretty cool. Me, myself, I was influenced by James Rolfe. So I love the Monster Madness, Cinemassacre, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of also my reason for doing this. I just want to plug shit. And not just my shit, but shit I think is cool. If you ever go to my site, hocof.blogspot.com, if you look to the right, I have cool sites. So if I mention a lot of these sites, but I don't like give links or names or anything like that, you can go there and I'll put in a little screenshot or something. You can just go to the right to cool sites. You can go to Bot Talk and hang out on the message board. You can click on Atop the Fourth Wall and watch Linkara's reviews. Maybe you agree with him. Maybe you think Cry for Justice is a piece of shit and I'm totally wrong. But anyway, go there, watch that, and these are all sort of retorts to the points he brings up. Because they're good points, I guess. I just don't agree with all of them. So anyway, yeah, go there, look on the right. You can see all those different sites I just talked about on the cool sites on my blog. But yeah, so Prometheus gets killed by Green Arrow. I also just want to say, I think the main reason why Comic Justice made the shift, I think early on when you had guys like the Comet throwing guys off buildings and Superman, manhandling a bunch of guys and kind of, doing this kind of vigilante type justice and all that stuff. Captain Marvel mowing down guys with bullets and stuff. And I think when it made the shift to what we consider traditional comic justice, the put them in handcuffs, send them to jail, the kind of Flash Rogues Gallery, I think part of that is not so much out of an ethical standpoint. I mean, part of it is, I think that all started when the Comics Code came into play. Once they got rid of all the Tales from the Crypt shit, and they had all this strict, self-censorship, that's when the no-killing code started, really, in my mind. I mean, because there were plenty of guys throwing people off buildings and doing all kinds of shit like that, until then, because otherwise things were pretty gruesome in some cases. Or it was just kind of like, oh yeah, they fucking died, who cares? It wasn't like this thing of, I've got a gun to the guy's head. No, don't do it. You will become just like them. I don't know, to me, whatever. But anyway. But that brings up a good segue. I'm thinking of Red Hood and the Joker.
Is that what you think this is about? That you let me die? I don't know what cloud your judgment worse. Your guilt or your antiquated sense of morality. Bruce, I forgive you for not saving me. But why? why on God's earth is he still alive? Ignoring what he's done in the past. Blindly, stupidly disregarding the entire graveyards he's filled. The thousands who have suffered. The friends he's crippled. You know, I thought I'd be the last person you'd ever let him hurt. If it had been you that he'd beat to a bloody pulp, if he had taken you from this world, I would have done nothing but search the planet for this pathetic pile of evil death-worshipping garbage.
That Red Hood doesn't kill the Joker not out of any, moral compunction. It's not like Batman convinces him or whatever. It's out of a creative decision. It's like nobody wants to recreate the Joker. Nobody wants to recreate the greatest villain they ever frickin' created for Batman. And that's another thing, too. I mean, in some ways, the movie justice of Batman can be attributed to the randomness of his life. Joker would always die in the comics anyway, but he'd just fucking come back. So it's like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just kind of like, dude gets electrocuted, dude gets eaten by sharks, dude gets blown up in a fucking speedboat, there's plenty of things like that, but he comes back because he's popular. What are you going to do about that? Like, that's creative, that's, from a creative standpoint, or even a marketing, money-making, people buy the Batman comics when the Joker shows up. That's all it is. Otherwise, you wouldn't have that horribly atrocious Last Laugh crossover if people didn't like the Joker, with Joker's face stamped on every fucking stupid book on that time. Anyway, sorry, but that's part of comics, I guess. So another thing I wanted to bring up, just because I know maybe I'm speaking Linkara's language a little better. What about Freddy Krueger? To me, it's like that goes back to that idea of proactive justice. Freddy Krueger was brought to trial and got off on a technicality. That's the kind of thing that Hal Jordan's getting at. The kind of thing where the rules of society... think of that on a larger scale, I guess. In Freddy's case, there was a technicality, right? So the rules of society got screwed up, and then the parents went out and did the whole mob justice thing, right? Okay, regardless of whether you agree with that or not, the point is the system failed, and then you had a group of parents trying to act outside of the constraints of societal rules and laws. Cry for Justice, I think, in terms of proactive justice and what the original intention was and what they wanted to do, is similar, but you think of it on the larger superhero scale. Superheroes have their own rules and standards. Oh, we always handcuff guys. Oh, we always bring them to justice. We handcuff them and we send them to trial and whatever. And in some cases, that kind of makes sense with guys like the Flash. There's always been that... How do I explain it?
Flash was creative. He'd have run circles around us, spinning away our oxygen.
Ha! All you do is punch and kick like a child throwing a tantrum.
The old Scarlet Speedster would vibrate his molecules right out of that bronze.
With a smile and an aw shucks that just made you want to rip him to shreds, You miss him.
Who? Us? Miss the Flash?
Don't be absurd.
The Flash villains, especially in Barry Allen's day, you always got the vibe of they're bad guys, but they're not going to kill anybody. They were in it for the game, for the stealing money, for, doing the cool job. So you can understand why Flash doesn't just, vibrate his fingers into their brains and end it all or whatever, because it's like, dude, there were unwritten, unspoken rules between Flash and his rogues gallery. So you never had this kind of ethical dilemma going on. But there's no unspoken rule between Prometheus. There's no unspoken rule about the Joker and Batman and what they will or won't do. They could do anything. And Prometheus does do anything. So I think in the grander scheme of things, you've got what the regular superhero rules and structures are, And like I said, it has to do with some comic book history. Justice League Elite, The Authority, Squadron Supreme, all those cases where they step out of what's considered the norm and go one step further. You know, you could say, are they extremists? Are they not? You know, whatever.